Chapter 3 The Covenant of Pretending. Some dreams don't whisper. They arrive dressed for the stage, with lace, rings, cathedrals, and chandeliers. On the surface, they look like fairy tales, the kind every little girl is supposed to want. But dream language isn't about surfaces. God was peeling back the illusion, showing me what happens when covenant is traded for costume, when life becomes performance instead of partnership. Love had to cost me something before I could recognize the real. Illusion had to draw blood before I could discern truth. Sometimes the wound itself is the only doorway wide enough for His light to enter. These dreams weren't fairy tales at all. They were mirrors. God letting me walk through performance so I would learn to hunger for substance, stripping the lace off of the rot so I wouldn't mistake counterfeit for covenant. This isn't a story about broken vows. It's about how God used the breaking to initiate me into a love that restores instead of drains. This is Act 2, The Mansions. Dream 1, A Princess at Noon. It began at a house by the river. At first glance, it was beautiful. Trees arching overhead, water moving steady and calm just beyond the porch. The river gleamed like a promise, alive with the kind of steadiness only God can carve into creation. It was everything that the cabin was not. When I stepped inside, the air turned sour, mildew in the walls, floorboards sagging, foundation cracked and unsteady. Rats skittered along the baseboards, sheets were stained. The Bible lay cracked open to blank pages, holy on the cover, but empty in the middle. I told myself, maybe I could scrub this into something sacred. Maybe love means cleaning what isn't mine until it looks like devotion. The porch lights flickered as if agreeing with my self-deception. He stood beside me, voice eager as though trying to sell me on the place. This could be ours. I stared at the walls, uneasy. I don't know about that. His answer came quick and unwavering and entirely unhelpful. Lacey, you just have to be stronger. The words fell like a verdict, not a vow. There was no offer to build with me, no promise to repair, no covenant of shared work. Just the burden shifted fully onto me. The river lapped outside, steady and indifferent, while inside, the house sagged under its own weakness. The walls dissolved, and I was in a field beneath an ancient tree, a place that should have felt altar-ready. But the air buzzed with hurry, hands tugged at my dress, shoved a bouquet into my grip, and turned my shoulders toward the aisle. Plans whirled around me like gnats, menus, music, centerpieces, deadlines. There was no pause, no partnership, only a flurry that carried me like a current. I wasn't walking with someone, I was being pushed by the rush. Someone pressed a velvet box into my palm. This is forever, they said, like a cashier handing over change. I opened it and the ring slid through my fingers, two bright promises vanishing into weeds and gravel. No one bent to help. Laughter rose all around me. Pretend you still have them. Just keep walking. So I curled my empty hand as if it held gold and stepped forward anyway, playing the bride with nothing in her grasp. At the aisle's edge, the music swelled and I froze. My eyes searched for the man waiting at the altar and the words slipped out before I could catch them. Who is that? My mother, behind me, patted my shoulder and whispered, soft but steady, Don't worry, honey, it's just your first divorce. The rest get easier. I lifted my chin, steadied my bouquet, and stepped forward. But as soon as my heel struck the aisle runner, it shifted beneath me. The white fabric stretched into wood, slanting downward, step after step, until the aisle became a staircase spiraling underground. My dress dragged heavy behind me, the lace catching on splinters as I descended. At the bottom was no altar, no kiss, no promise, just a basement. The air was damp and sour, thick with the smell of rust and mildew. Shadows moved like slow breath along the stone walls. Women sat in rows, shackled to iron rings embedded in the rock. Their faces were gray, not skin gray, but soul gray, eyes dulled like smoke, lips cracked from silence. Above each set of chains hung a wooden nameplate, carved like trophies as if every space had been reserved in advance. One of them gestured toward an empty section of wall. A pair of shackles dangled there, a board above them burned with my new last name. Here's your place, her look said. Your sentence has already been written. I moved as if in a trance. My bouquet slipped from my hands, the petals hitting the wet floor like drops of blood. The lace of my dress dragged through it, streaking pink. Somewhere near the front, a woman turned her head and murmured, almost to herself, I was a princess at noon, and the dishwasher by 9. Her words hit like a match against dry paper, one sentence that revealed the truth of the whole room. Crowns that turn to chores, vows that dissolve into servitude. Then a man's voice rose from the far corner, calm and commanding, quoting scripture like a judge reading charges. Verses I'd once heard in pews and weddings became indictments here. Wives, submit yourselves. The two shall become one flesh. His tone turned holy words into iron bars, each syllable wrapped tighter, twisting obedience into bondage. It was like being sentenced with the language of God, every verse a verdict, every breath a chain. I backed against the wall, beneath my nameplate. No one forced me into the shackles. I slipped them over my own wrist because that's what you did down here. Because I thought maybe if I submitted hard enough, performed well enough, it would count as love. The chains were heavy on my wrists, the damp stone pressing into my back when the basement flickered. Not in light, but in memory. Suddenly, I was no longer shackled underground. I was back in that white dress. The hem was dirty, snagged with grass and grease, dragging like a burden I couldn't shake. My arms ached from carrying chairs, from lifting what wasn't mine to lift, from building a stage I wasn't meant to build alone. The air smelled not of mildew, but of smoke and cheap beer, and still I sat there smiling. Because that's what brides do. They smile. But inside I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my bouquet into the fire, to flip every table, to collapse in the dirt and sob until the facade shattered. My chest burned with the cry. This is not how this day was meant to go. But I didn't. I just tilted my head. I laughed at the right moments. I smoothed over the cracks because no one likes a bridezilla. And deep down I thought, I asked for this. I can't complain about what I invited. Then a voice cut through, low and steady, like it traveled from eternity into that very moment. You didn't ask for love. You asked for a wedding. The words landed in me like a stone hitting water, sending ripples through every illusion I'd held. And in that memory I saw it plain. Years before, there I sat, wine-drunk and careless with friends. I had even said it out loud. I don't care about forever. I just want to know what it's like to wear the dress, walk down the aisle, do the thing. One big moment, and then, thanks, that was fun, nice knowing you. I had prayed for performance, not covenant. And God, with terrifying precision, had handed me exactly what I had asked for. The flicker dimmed, the walls closed back in, and I was chained in the basement again. But the truth was echoing off the stone. I had traded covenant for costume, forever for a single night, love for a stage. And that realization was its own kind of shackle. Years passed, at least in the dream, it felt like years. Time didn't flow in the basement, it dripped. I sat among the other women, colorless and compliant, my head bowed, my wrist bruised from trying to adjust my own chains. We whispered sometimes, trading scraps of advice the way prisoners trade contraband. But mostly, we were just quiet, waiting. It wasn't agony all the time. Sometimes it was just numbness, the kind of numbness that sinks so deep you almost forget that you're in a cage. The scripture man's voice faded into background noise, like a radio left on in the other room. Days blurred and seasons shifted, noticed only by the chill in the stone. Sometimes the basement door would creak open. He would step in, not to stay, not to sit with me in the dark, but to take what he wanted in the few minutes he allowed himself there. When he finished, he would smooth his shirt, glance toward the stairs, and offer the same hollow line on his way out. I'll make it up to you. Dinner, a date, something nice. But later never came. The promise was a coin that never hit the table, always tossed into the air and lost before it landed. His visits weren't companionship, weren't covenant, they were transactions. The basement stayed cold, the chain stayed fast, and the color never returned. And each time the door shut behind him, I felt the same thing, the echo of footsteps fading upward, leaving me where I was, alone in the dark, clutching to words that sounded like love but had no substance at all. That's the difference between the counterfeit and the covenant. Counterfeit love uses words as currency, promises as distractions, and bodies as transactions. It leaves you chained, gray, and still starving for the feast that you were actually made for. Covenant love, the kind God promises, doesn't take and vanish. It stays. It sits in the dark with you. It doesn't just visit, it transforms. It breaks chains instead of fastening them tighter. And then one day I felt it, a hand on my shoulder, warm and steady, not grabbing, not forcing, just resting and comforting. This touch was different. It was alive. It radiated through my skin like sunlight poured through stone. I knew instantly this wasn't another captor. This wasn't one of the women. And this wasn't the man quoting scripture like a prison sentence. This was God. The same God I'd heard about but never really known. The same God whose voice I couldn't hear over the noise of my own striving. He was here. Not above the stairs, not waiting at some future altar, but here in the basement with me, palm warm on my shoulder. It startled me because down here no one touched except to bind. No one offered warmth except to lure. But his touch didn't demand, it didn't instruct, it just stayed, like a quiet presence waiting for me to notice. I didn't turn around, not yet. But, for the first time in years, my spine straightened. My lungs filled all the way to the bottom, and a flicker of color trembled at the edge of my vision like something waking up inside of me that I'd long forgotten existed. I didn't know it then, but that moment marked the beginning of my exit, the first hairline crack in the basement's hold on me. In the basement, the dream was nothing more than a false reflection, an imitation of the mansion's living performance. Then the dream map shifted, and the counterfeit gave way to the real illusion, the homes that acted as the headstones for what was truly buried beneath. This is Dream 2, Rehearsals. I'm inside a huge house that feels like a cathedral dressed up as a home. Wooden stairs like altars, rooms that open like pews, and windows that spill light in blessed beams. I know one man here. He's the same shadow-smiled stranger from the pavilion, the Roman soldier figure who watches without shouting. He's the constant in these visions, the quiet line threaded through each scene. He has a girlfriend who doesn't like me. She doesn't have to. Dream logic gives her suspicion like armor, but it doesn't stop the odd, simple friendship between him and me. One afternoon, she leaves with her friends, and while the mansion empties, we take the whole thing as our playground. We run through the rooms, water guns in hand, shrieking and laughing like teenagers who have stolen time. We chase each other down the front steps, breathless and ridiculous, hands clasped in that precarious half-innocence that feels like the brink of something true. She comes back, furious with her pack, an absurd theatrical posse brandishing flamethrowers in the fever of the dream. We dart behind couches and into hidden rooms, heartbeats slamming. I end up nose to nose with him behind an upholstered couch. He leans forward, testing me like someone holding a question between his lips, and I answer, soft and immediate, with a kiss. The house roars. The party tramples through. We press flat to the floor and listen to the hunt above. Then the dream shifts. I wake in the bedroom of the mansion. He's there, oddly mundane, counting or moving money around on a phone like a man who moves invisible pieces on a board. His girlfriend storms in. He shuts her down, cool and final. She backs away, the argument dies. But I don't have bandwidth for the drama. I'm thinking of shoes, dancing shoes to be specific, because tomorrow I teach a group how to dance and I want to be rested enough to learn myself. Later, I was sitting at a long wooden table in the mansion, laying out tarot cards, not for divination, but as a creative exercise. I explained to him that I used the cards' imagery and archetypes to spark stories, short narratives spun from random pulls. It wasn't witchcraft, it was practice, just a way of loosening the knots of my imagination and honing the rhythm of storytelling. I tell him God had me do the same thing with music. I'd put a playlist on shuffle, take the first 10 random songs, and challenge myself to build a short story from the lyrics and moods that they carried. Both the cards and the music became like training grounds, places where God was sharpening the gift he had tucked away for this very season. He watched with curiosity, asking questions as I spoke. There was something about his interest that made me feel seen, like he understood that I wasn't just playing with cards or music, I was practicing for something larger. Looking back, I realize God often disguises preparation as play. He knows if he framed everything as serious training, quote unquote, I might have run from it or resisted. But in these games of chance, with shuffled cards or shuffled playlists, he was quietly strengthening the muscles of my creativity, teaching me how to weave symbols into meaning, how to turn fragments into story. It wasn't random at all. It was rehearsal for this very work. The next day, the teaching gig unravels. The lead teacher, his girlfriend maybe, or at least someone like her, has to leave. Panic ripples through the girls. They fold like paper without the leader. I go inside to fetch water, and when I return, chaos. The troupe is falling apart. In that confusion, I step up and promise to teach them. I do it poorly at first. I'm still learning, but I keep saying, "It's okay. We'll figure it out. It's okay." I run back in to strap on my dancing shoes. I was buckling my shoes when he showed up, grinning like he'd been waiting to pounce. "You think you can really turn that circus out there into a dance?" I snorted. "Better than standing around here looking useless." "Harsh," he said, but his grin widened. "Still, train wreck incoming." "Don't worry," I shot back, tugging the second strap tight. "I'll dedicate the disaster to you." He laughed. "Well, if you go down, I'm not picking you up, but I'll stand right here and watch." I shoved his shoulder as I stood. Good, because I'd rather hit the floor than owe you. With that, I turned and jogged out to the field, shoes strapped tight, heart strangely light, as if I was about to start an adventure I couldn't quite name. The man wasn't just anyone. He was an ordained minister. For a while, he watched me dance from the shadows, but there was nothing cold about it. His gaze felt steady, curious, almost like a quiet blessing. And then suddenly, he wasn't in the window at all. He was right there beside me in the field, standing with me nose to nose again. The shock of it stole my breath, but before I could even ask how he got there, I caught the look on his face. He was glowing with pure excitement, adrenaline running through him like a current. He bounced on his toes like a boxer about to step into the ring, not tense, but alive. That's when I noticed his shoes, a brand new pair of Nike Jordans. He tilted his feet toward me, grinning like a kid showing off his best new toy. It was so unexpectedly human, so ordinary, that I laughed out loud. He laughed too, delighted that I'd noticed, and for a moment we were just two kids standing in a field, caught up in the ridiculous joy of it. I asked him why he was there, still laughing through the question, and instead of answering right away, he started dancing with me, awkwardly trying to mimic my steps. It wasn't polished or graceful, but it didn't need to be. The fun was in the trying and the silliness of not knowing the moves but wanting to join anyway. He leaned in, breathless and honest. "Listen." I showed up excited and willing. "Beyond that," he shrugged, sheepish, "I don't have much to offer you." I laughed, just shaking my head. "Good, because all I've got are these dancing shoes." I lifted my foot as if it were a flag. "That's literally it. I've invested everything I have into this performance, this calling. No backup plan, no nest egg, just shoes and a vision. My whole life is tied up in learning these steps." He blinked, surprised, and I went on. "It's not about what you own or what you can buy that makes a good man. I don't need someone to bankroll me. I need someone who can see what I see and move with me. Someone who helps me build the rhythm God's showing me, not stand in my way or hold me back. I need a dance partner." His smile softened into something steadier. "Well," he said, tilting his Jordans toward me like a vow, "then I'm your guy, because I came to dance." I grinned. "You wore your commitment on your feet." And as I said it, I felt the weight of my own words. The shoes weren't just shoes. They were my obedience, the evidence of every night spent praying instead of sleeping, every day spent writing instead of retreating, every choice to keep moving forward when quitting would have been easier. The shoes were my yes to God, worn thin by practice but still laced tight. He had his Jordans, I had my shoes. Neither of us had much else, but maybe that was the point. God was showing me that He doesn't build partnerships on possessions. He builds them on rhythm, willingness, and a shared yes to the dance that He's already choreographed. The field we stood in, it wasn't just dirt and grass, it felt like a rehearsal stage. The starting line of a story God had already written long before we arrived, a stage He had cleared just for us to learn the first steps together. And even then, I sensed this was only practice. The field was our warm-up, our dress rehearsal. The real performance, the holy opera, waited ahead. Someday the spotlight would widen, the music would swell, and the stage God Himself had built would call us forward. But for now, the field was enough. For now, we practiced the rhythm. "I want you to be my woman," he said simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I shook my head, half smiling, half exasperated. "I have no idea what I'm doing or where I'm going," I told him honestly. "I'm just doing it because that's what God is guiding me to do." He didn't flinch. His reply was calm and confident, as if there was no room for argument. "I don't care what people think. This is where God wants me to be." Something about the way he said it, the ease, the certainty, put my mind at ease. We laughed again, caught up in the joy of it, and for a moment, the whole field felt like a stage. Dream 3. The Performance. I found myself at a mansion again. The place was alive with motion, people rushing about, setting up tables, arranging flowers, the air buzzing with expectancy, even though the show was still hours away. I was just a guest, but even as an outsider, I wanted to help. I was there alone. Then the dream shifted. Suddenly it was night. The lights had softened, the crowd had settled, and I was standing by myself when a man approached me. Younger than me, tan complexion, quick with a joke. Conversation slipped easily between us like we'd known each other longer than we had. Soon his family drifted over, and I discovered it was his sister's wedding we were attending. Nervous but willing, I followed him to their table and sat among them. They welcomed me warmly, except for one. One sister's dislike was clear. At some point, he leaned over and said he had to step away, some obligation that he couldn't ignore, but promised, "I'll be right back." I half registered his absence, but before I could think much of it, hands tugged at me. His sisters and cousins were planning a choreographed dance on a stage, glittering and synchronized. They wanted me to join them, but I shook my head. "I can't dance," I insisted. But still they pressed. The insistent one, the sister who didn't like me, was pushing the hardest. Her smile was sugar over steel. It wasn't encouragement, it was a setup. Finally, I relented, but before I stepped onto stage, I whispered a quiet prayer. "Abba, please don't let me make a fool of myself. Don't let me miss the beat completely. Help me move with some kind of grace." But almost immediately, I started fumbling, steps out of sync, turns in the wrong direction, my clumsiness on display for everyone. My face flushed hot with humiliation. And then, like a tear in the dream fabric, everything shifted. For a flash, I was no longer in my own body, but in his. I was seeing myself from another's eyes. We weren't in the wedding hall anymore, but in a log cabin, wood-paneled and warm. And there I was on the couch looking up at him, concern creasing my face. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. He was pacing in front of a fireplace, anxious, his own thoughts a messy storm. Will she like it? Will she think I'm joking? What if she laughs? He gripped the back of a chair, trying to steady himself. "Please," I said again, cutting through his spiraling, "tell me what's going on." He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a song began to play, from nowhere, from everywhere. It filled the cabin. I started crying, deep, uncontainable sobs that drowned the music entirely. Without hesitation, he rushed to my side, dropping onto the couch, arms wrapping me tight, holding me like the answer didn't matter as much as the moment. And then, just as quickly, I was back on the stage, breathless, my face still hot from embarrassment. And then I saw him again, rushing towards the stage this time. My heart sank. I was sure he was coming to help me off the stage, to confirm what I had already feared, that I was being foolish, that I didn't belong up there. I braced for that sting of rescue, ready to retreat. But instead, he stood below me, pantomiming with an invisible fishing rod. He cast it my way, hooked me, and began reeling me into step. I played along, and the awkwardness turned into something else entirely. We built a rhythm together, improvised, hilarious, and deeply supportive. The crowd roared with laughters and cheers. The focus shifted from my missteps to our connection. His guidance turned my chaos into performance, and suddenly I wasn't failing. I was being celebrated. But not everyone was pleased. The sister's mask cracked. Fury twisted her face as we exited the stage, and she tried to push a massive crate of glass jars to crash and shatter. I caught it, bracing my weight against hers. We wrestled in silence until another sister caught us mid-struggle. "What are you two doing?" she hissed. "She's trying to push these jars off the stage," the angry sister accused. But the truth was obvious. My hands pulled the crate toward me, holding steady. Hers pushed, flat-palmed and forceful. The others grabbed her, scolding, dragging her away as she screamed. "She ruined the dance!" Tears streamed as she fought against their arms, and then she tried to charge at me. He stepped between us, firm and protective, shielding me until the storm passed. He turned then, his hand on my arm, his eyes searching. "Are you okay?" he asked. And I was, because of him. Then the dream shifted again, and suddenly I learned he was a songwriter, aspiring, creative, restless with possibility. We talked for what felt like hours, maybe days. Our hopes, our scars, our origins. Somewhere in that space of shared becoming, he pulled a ring from his pocket, a family heirloom, and he asked me to marry him. I said yes immediately, though nerves prickled. What would his family think of me? A stranger, ordinary, unpolished. But instead of rejection, they celebrated, all except the one sister. Even his father, stern and intimidating, the one who had made me most uneasy, was radiant with joy. The dream closed with him beside me, holding me, his voice full of excitement about his music. I smiled up at him and said the words that ended the dream. You're so talented and capable. You can do anything you want to do in this life, and I support you always. Dream 4. The Demon of Desire. Another dream and another mansion. The house is a flurry of preparation, and the air tastes like expectation. I'm alone at the bar, nursing nothing, when a stranger slides into the stool beside me. He isn't the soldier, not the minister in Jordan's. He's someone new, a man in a suit with short dark hair streaked with gray. His build is thick, solid, not intimidating, but impossible to overlook. We start talking, and the conversation keeps trying to unspool the story that I haven't yet learned to tell. He leans in, genuinely curious. Then what happened? He asks again and again, like he wants to hold the plot in his hands and help me rearrange it. People interrupt. 2 women come over, acquaintances of his, so introductions are made. One woman smiles at me like sunlight, the other is cool and closed. He keeps trying to hear my story, but the room pulls him away. He promises, "I'll see you later," and disappears into the tide of the wedding crowd. I find him again in a pew, calm, a quiet presence in the assembled faces. A young woman fusses with something beside him, trying to offer him something. He's polite, but distant. And when he sees me, he flags me over like a lighthouse calling a small boat. "Come sit," he says. I slide into the pew beside him, and all around us the world is anything but calm. The show is in full swing, an extravagance like I've never witnessed before. Acrobats soar through the rafters, body twisting like ribbons of light. Dancers stamp and spin, sequins scattering sparks into the air. The music is thunderous, triumphant, and swelling like it could split the ceiling open. It feels like a dream within a dream, a holy spectacle disguised as a circus, a cathedral of motion and sound. As we sit there, murmurs rise behind us. Do you know who he is? People whisper titles, executive producer, the kind of man who gets to make things happen. I shrug. I only met him hours before. When I tell him I've written something, his interest sharpens. Casually, I hand him my iPad. He reads. Others behind him edge closer, peeking at the first lines. He stops, lifting his head, and says the kind of thing that shifts the air. "This is incredible. How can I help you make this into something real?" I tell him, breathless and slightly embarrassed, "That's only 2 pages. There are 346 more. He is stunned in the way someone who recognizes rare wood recognizes a good plank. That's when he offers it unprompted. "I used to believe in God," he admits, "when I was younger. But now, look at the state of the world. How could I?" I answer gently but firmly. Can I offer an alternate perspective? Maybe God is everywhere, but the devil has the world too distracted with chaos and conflict to notice. If all we do is focus on the chaos, we end up focusing on the devil, not God. The world is allowing anger to breed more anger, and conflict to breed more conflict. It's a negative feedback loop in the spirit. But if you shift your gaze even a little, you'll start to see him again. Something flickers in his eyes, but before it can deepen, the scene fractures. Suddenly, we're back in the basement where I had once been chained. The ceiling low, the floor damp, the air thick with mildew and despair. Women are chained to the walls, ghosted in grayscale, as if the color had been siphoned from them. I move among them, placing hands on shoulders, whispering, "You carry Christ's light. Remember who you are." And then my voice grows stronger, louder. I am not whispering anymore. You are not scraps. You are not here to survive on crumbs of affection or half-hearted attention from anyone who cannot see your worth. Please hear me. Stop accepting table scraps and calling it love. You are a feast. You are light. You are temples of the living God. And no man, no demon, no chain can tell you otherwise. And then, sharp, cutting, his voice slashed across mine, the scripture man in the corner, rising with iron in his tones, spitting verses like commands. "Wives, submit yourselves. The 2 shall become one flesh." The words landed like chains rattling against the women's wrists. Their heads bowed again, the color that had been flickering at their cheeks dimmed. My chest ached. I could feel the atmosphere turning heavy, his counterfeit authority pulling them back into obedience. Before I could speak again, Zeke stood. Until then, he had been nothing more than the executive producer, curious, listening, letting me speak, the man who asked for my story, the man I had told to believe in God, but now his presence shifted. The very air thickened around him. At first it's subtle, a shift in posture, a straightening of the spine, but then it's unmistakable. His suit begins to glow, not like light shining on him, but light pouring out of him. Threads of gold unravel from his cuffs. His face brightens as if someone has lifted a veil, revealing a radiance too ancient to be human. The glow deepens until it feels like the entire basement is holding its breath. Chains rattle, dust rises. The man quoting scripture falters mid-verse, his voice cracking under the weight of something bigger than the room. And then he speaks. It isn't the executive producer anymore. It's Jesus. Every syllable carries the gravity of mountains and the tenderness of water. It breaks my heart and ignites my fury to see my father's words twisted into chains, wielded to keep my daughters obedient to men who are serving the devil. No more. I am here to rectify a world of injustice. I am here to break what has broken you. The basement shakes and the iron groans. The man quoting scripture stumbles backward like he's been struck by an unseen wave. Out of the shadows she comes, slinking, sultry, a demon dressed in desire. Her form shimmers like heat on pavement, shifting between a temptress in velvet and a viper coiling for the strike. Her eyes are steel, her smile dripping with mockery. She circles the women like a predator cloaked in perfume, her voice dripping with sweetness that curdled in the air. Look at them. They don't want you. They want me. I give them what they ache for, desire that burns and a touch that thrills, the fleeting rush of being wanted, if only for a night. They open their own chains when I whisper. They choose me. They long for the hunger, the chase, the fire. They don't want sacred. They want to feel alive, and only I can give them that. The words slither through the air like silk, coiling around the women's ears, tempting, taunting, almost beautiful in their poison. Some of them tremble as though part of them still remembers that lure. But then, Jesus steps forward. The whole room shifts. His light pours outward, so radiant it makes the shadows recoil. His voice thunders, steady but cutting through every lie. No, you are wrong. You promise fire, but leave them burned. You offer touch, but never love. You give them hunger, but starve their souls. You make them feel alive, but only as they march toward death. He kneels to the women, his eyes fierce but full of compassion. His voice lowers, but somehow it shakes the very stones. Daughters, hear me. You do not belong to her. You are not scraps of desire to be consumed and discarded. You are chosen. You are radiant. You are mine, bought with my blood and sealed with my spirit, destined for covenant love that no counterfeit can rival. She cannot give you life because I am the life. Light ignites from his hands and floods the basement. The demon shrieks, claws at the air, and writhes against a force that she cannot fight. Her sultry words dissolve into a scream as she is hurled back into shadow, dissolving into nothing more than ash on the wind. Silence falls. And then, movement. The women look down at their wrists. The shackles are gone. Iron lies in pieces at their feet. They touch their skin in disbelief, then turn toward him. One by one, they fall to their knees, not in submission to men, not in defeat, but in worship. Faces lifted, eyes radiant, and hands raised. Their voices rise in laughter, in praise, and tears that taste like freedom. The basement swells with sound, not despair, but with hallelujahs. As their worship rises, the walls themselves begin to change. Stones glow as if lit from within. Chains melt into streams of gold that pull on the floor like offerings. Air rushes clean and sweet as though heaven itself has broken through the cracks. Jesus stands among them, not gloating, not commanding, just blessing. His hands raised over them, his face alight with joy, and as they sing, I can't stay on my feet either. My knees hit the ground, not because I am forced, but because love demands nothing less. And then he speaks, not just to one of us, but to all of us. His voice rolls like thunder and whispers like wind all at once. Daughters, you are mine. Not broken things to be used, not shadows to be silenced, not slaves to counterfeit vows. You are radiant. You are loved with an everlasting love that no man and no demon can undo. The words pierce, not as accusation, but as healing. They seep into bone and marrow, straight through the cracks of every heart in the room. Tears pour harder, but this time they are cleansing tears. The King of Kings lowers himself onto the stone floor, meeting us eye to eye. His robes brush the dust. His hands reach toward ours. His gaze is soft, steady, and impossible to bear, and impossible to turn away from. Look at me, he says, quiet but commanding. I do not set above you, demanding perfection. I kneel with you. I rejoice with you. I suffer with you. And I will raise you with me. A holy stillness floods the basement. Worship doesn't stop, it deepens. It becomes less a sound we make and more a current we are caught inside of, like heaven itself is pulling breath through our lungs. The basement is no longer dark stone and mildew. It is alive, a sanctuary made holy by his presence among us, his knees in the dust beside ours. Dream 5, the premiere. I was in a wooden box with my papaw, square, rattling, the kind of thing that looked like it belonged on tracks, even though there were none. No wheels, no steering, nothing to guide it, just raw wood bolted together, shuddering like it might splinter apart at any moment. Then it dropped. The sky tore open around us, the box tumbling, spinning, air screaming past, and then, as dreams do, everything shifted. One heartbeat I was inside the falling box, and the next I was barefoot on the mountain skin, my papaw still plummeting with the wreckage into the ravine below. The air was thin and cold, so high I could taste the sky. Clouds rolled like oceans beneath me, hiding everything but the peak itself. The plateau stretched flat and endless, houses lined up in neat rows that reached as far as sight could carry, but silent, still, and empty. That's when he appeared, calm and steady, as if he'd been waiting for me. "How did you get up here?" Jesus asked. I laughed nervously. "I'm not sure. I just fell. My papaw drove me here." His eyes held mine, gentle but piercing. "That's not how most people get here." "I just did," I said, bristling. He tilted his head, amused yet patient. "No, Lacey, let me show you." He led me to the edge of the mountain. The drop was sheer and dizzying, clouds breaking just enough to reveal a road carved into the rock below. It twisted like a serpent, steep, crumbling, and treacherous. Traffic jammed every inch of it, cars bumper to bumper, engines straining, people leaning out, shouting, slipping, falling back down. Tires spun in place, doors swung open as some tried to climb on foot, only to tumble into the ravine. "This," he said, pointing to the chaos below, "is how most people try to get to me." I stared at the lines of cars, endless as the horizon. Then how did I get up here? "You floated," he said simply, "but not the way you think." His voice softened, but it carried like a wind through the high air. "You weren't carried here by accident. You got here because you let go. Of all the weight, all the noise, all the possessions and problems you clung to. When you released them and asked my Father for guidance, you weren't falling anymore. You were rising. You were being lifted straight into my arms." And then, like a dream inside a dream, he showed me my own story, the wooden box, the sky, the crash, me praying, sobbing, pleading. As he spoke, I saw myself lying in bed, rising out of water at the same time, gasping like someone surfacing for air. "That's how I got here?" I whispered. "Yes," he said softly, the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth. "That's how." "Actually," he said, "there's an opera tonight. You should come with me." A flicker of sarcasm darted through my mind before I could catch it. "An opera? Really? That's great for you, but while you're sitting here enjoying the show, the earth is overrun with zombies, vampires, demons, and bears." Jesus chuckled out loud. "And yet," he said, "you're here with me. Why?" The answer flared up in my head before I could stop it. "Because it sucks down there." His grin widened, sly and knowing. "See, there's that sarcasm again. You always try to hide it like you're getting away with something, but I've heard every single snarky line since you were a kid." He leaned in closer, voice dropping. "Half the time, it makes me laugh." I gaped at him, heat rushing to my cheeks. "You like my sarcasm?" "Like it? I counted on it," he said, eyes twinkling. "It's part of the rhythm you walk in. Even your sass has purpose." I folded my arms, trying to cover the mix of embarrassment and wonder. "Well, you created me, so that's kind of on you, isn't it?" He threw his head back and laughed, the sound ringing off the empty square like bells. "Exactly, and I don't regret a single bit of it." Then softer, his gaze anchored mine. "I made you this way because I enjoy you this way. I don't just tolerate who you are, Lacey. I delight in it, every detail." Something in me stilled at that. The sarcasm melted off my lips, leaving only awe. Before I could answer, the mountaintop shifted. The plateau became a square, open air lit by torches that flickered in the thinning fog. A pavilion rose at its center. On the stage was a singer, luminous and patient. His hands clutched sheet music he clearly didn't need. He lifted his gaze to the sky like he was waiting for a cue. The air tightened as if the next note could tear open the heavens. The timbre of it wasn't performance, it was summons. The sound of a herald poised to blow a trumpet, though no trumpet was in sight. Beside me, Jesus stood silent, watching. His presence steadied the ground under my feet, and though he didn't speak, I understood. This wasn't just an opera, it was a rehearsal for something eternal, a glimpse of a moment not yet come. The angelic singer's voice hovered on the edge of release, a note caught between silence and declaration, and the whole mountaintop seemed to lean in to listen. An opera? I whispered, almost laughing. For us? Jesus only smiled, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Yes, he said softly. You should see it. I glanced around again, half exasperated, half awed. This seems like a waste, I admitted under my breath. An entire opera, and the only people here are you and me. And I wasn't even supposed to be here. Jesus turned his eyes on me, the look that carries the weight of eternity, yet still feels like a joke shared between friends. Do you think heaven wastes effort? He asked gently. What is for you is for me, and what is for me is for you. The singer inhaled deep and steady. His voice broke open, low and resonant. The note quivered the air, reaching into my bones, setting the mountain itself thrumming like a struck string. I realized then, this wasn't just music, this was a message. The singer's voice was no ordinary voice. It carried the weight of a herald, the echo of someone destined to sound a call that would one day split the sky. And there I was, caught between disbelief and awe, watching an opera staged for an audience of two, Jesus and me. The singer's last note hung in the air. Silence blanketed the square, and I realized I was crying so hard the tears were soaking into my dress. Jesus looked at me, then lifted his eyes heavenward. His voice was steady, threaded with longing and hope. Abba? She's waited so long. May I give Lacey her dance partner now? The mountain seemed to pause, even the torches stilled. Then Abba's voice rolled through the air, deep and playful, the kind of sound that carried both thunder and tenderness. Now you ask me, he said with a chuckle. You didn't ask when you made her sarcastic. You didn't ask when you let her wrestle bears. And you didn't ask when you dropped her out of the sky in that wooden box. But this you bring to my desk? Jesus grinned, unbothered as if he'd expected the ribbing. Because this one matters most. Abba's laughter softened, melting into something warm and full. Then yes, he said gently, bring her partner to her. The one who will match her steps, who will steady her without dimming her fire. But make sure he's got good shoes. And for heaven's sake, keep him on beat this time. I don't want another fiasco like David dancing in his underwear. Jesus actually laughed out loud at that, shaking his head. Noted. Then he reached over, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. Their words wrapped around me like a father's arms, light-hearted but brimming with love. You are not forgotten, Lacey, he whispered. The dance is coming. And then, as if heaven itself punctuated his promise, the singer on stage stepped down. He walked straight toward me, eyes fixed on mine, reached out and took my hand. Without a word, he led me up the steps onto the stage and to the very center of the lights. The music swelled, his palm pressed steady to my back, and together we moved. Not rehearsed, not forced, but free, as if every step had already been written. It was only for us, our rhythm, and the echo of Abba's laughter somewhere above, soft and sure. In that moment, I knew it wasn't just permission. It was a promise made flesh. The dance wasn't coming. The dance had already begun. This chapter has been about stages. The field, the dance stage, the basement, the opera square. Each dream set me near a performance, but never quite inside of it. Always slightly removed, like God was pulling me aside to see things from another angle. I sat with Zeke in the pew while the spectacle roared above us. I knelt in the basement while chains broke, even as a show carried on overhead. I stumbled through a stranger's dance only to find someone reeling me back into step. I danced in a field by myself until a partner finally appeared. Again and again, I wasn't where the main stage was, but somewhere else, somewhere quieter. And then came the opera on the mountain. No crowd, no applause, just me and Jesus above the clouds, waiting for a single voice that trembled with eternity. Where the aisle at my old wedding dragged me downward into chains, the opera lifted me upward into a space where the air itself seemed to lean in and listen. That's the thread tying all of this together. God was teaching me the difference between the noise of performance and the stillness of presence. Performance dazzles for a moment, presence transforms. Performance needs an audience, presence is content with two. That's the spiritual paradox. The world blares its music, juggles its chaos, tries to hypnotize us with glitter and noise. But God doesn't need a spotlight. His miracles don't unfold in the flash of acrobats, but in the steady flame of transformation, the kind you almost miss if you're too busy clapping for the show. Zeke was a mirror of this. He first entered as a skeptic, wearing the skin of an executive producer weighed down by the world's noise, unsure if God was anywhere in it. But by the end of the dream, his form had shifted, the disguise fell away, and the truth stood radiant. He wasn't merely observing transformation, he was the source of it. Women who had been gray and shackled were suddenly lit with color. Despair became worth. Ashes flared into fire. Shame dissolved into glory. That unveiling was the point. Christ consciousness isn't about climbing ladders or gathering audiences. It's about becoming light in the dark places, about carrying his presence so deeply that even basements bloom. What Zeke revealed was not just who he was, Jesus in disguise, but who he desires us to become, reflections of his love, his strength, his freedom, partners in the holy work of dragging others out of gray and into color. And then came the opera singer. His voice was more than melody, it was pulse. It was as if the very heartbeat of heaven had taken shape in sound, the rhythm that had held galaxies in their orbits and blood in our veins. Every note was a summons, every pause a breath in the chest of God himself. It wasn't a performance, it was a reminder that creation has always been set to this rhythm, that even when I danced alone in fields or sat forgotten in pews, his song had been echoing underneath it all. That's what our cosmic heart teaches, that love is not an accessory or a fleeting feeling, it is a bloodstream of existence. It is what keeps breath in lungs and light in stars. And when I finally stopped chasing chandeliers and costumes, I could feel it. The opera wasn't for applause, it was the sound of eternity reminding me that I too was part of God's own heartbeat. And maybe that's what God keeps teaching me, that my work is not performance, not about applause or perfection. It's about stepping into rooms where people have gone gray and reminding them that they are radiant, about refusing to be pulled into the chaos and instead choosing the pew, the healing, the voice that cuts through the din. I am so passionate about speaking life into these women because I was once, truly for most of my adult life, a woman chained to the wall, devoid of color and begging for scraps. I begged men to love me, to hear me, to pick me, to notice me. I thought if I just tried harder, performed better, shrank smaller, I could fill the hole in my heart. But that hole was carved for Jesus alone. No earthly man could have ever healed it. Only he could. And so, for the last 18 months, I've been seeking Jesus with the same fervor I once wasted on pointlessly analyzing the behaviors of men. Where desperation once lived, devotion has taken its place. This is why he gave me words, why he lets me see. My role is not to match the world's noise, but to carry his heartbeat into the silence, until even the basements bloom, until every woman in gray remembers she is radiant, until the opera that has been echoing since Eden is in full swing.